Now, because this one's a little shorter than the others, I decided I'd give you guys a treat. We're gonna go into the theory that H.H. Holmes is Jack the Ripper. Going into the fact that they have a very big geography, they were in different countries, and that their killings are very different. I'm actually of the belief they're not the same person. Jack the Ripper claimed most of his victims out in the street, attacking women where he could have been easily caught in the act. H.H. Holmes is very different, that he preferred to work in private and literally built a whole building so that he could isolate and just do this privately. He was not about creeping around in public with a knife. However, somebody who is related to H.H. Holmes, H.H. Holmes is like an ancestor of his. His name is Jeff Mudgett, and he claims that he inherited 2 diaries from his grandfather, and after expert handwriting analysis determined H.H. Holmes had wrote them. However, he includes transcripts of these diaries and never included photocopies. I looked up this diary. I can't find like pictures of it or anything like that. I'm not calling his grandson a liar. I'm just saying anybody could say anything. So I personally have not seen any proof of these diaries, but putting that aside, we'll take him at his word just for now. According to these diaries, Holmes was present in London with one of his assistants during the Whitechapel murders. According to Mudgett, the diaries described training sessions between Holmes and his assistants. The man was instructed to murder prostitutes and excessively mutilate their bodies to cause a sensation in the country. Holmes' intent here was to distract from his own murders and the sexual organ harvest of upper-class women. Rich women's ovaries would have supposedly been healthier, and Holmes was in pursuit of a youth serum to allow him to live an unnaturally long life. Now let me tell you why none of this makes any sense. First of all, I feel like rich women dying would overshadow the prostitutes dying. I don't see how that would distract anything, honestly. I feel like that's very backwards. Because even in today's cases, sex workers, like serial killers, typically go after sex workers solely because people either don't notice they're gone or police don't really seem to care that much. It's a very different. I just think this entire thing is a little backwards. And I'm having a hard time believing in the Victorian era they were a lot more respectful towards sex workers. But you know, that's just me. I wasn't there. Maybe they were. Why is it always the reproductive systems must get harvested? It's really absurd. I think Jack the Ripper was an incel, honestly. Now, similarities that people look at to say that H.H. Holmes is Jack the Ripper is that he fits the description. Remember, yesterday when we were talking about Jack the Ripper, we said he was about 5'5" to 5'7". He had a tall hat. He had a long overcoat, and he had a mustache. Now, if you'll look over at this image of H.H. Holmes over here, he has all those things. He does match the description very, very well. However, that would take away from what was said earlier, that his assistant was doing the murders while he was murdering rich women. I'm very curious as to what this assistant looks like, but I think that kind of counteracts the theory. Their victims were predominantly women, and they both clearly had psychopathic tendencies. The Ripper case is specific. Oh, yeah. is true that they believe that the Jack the Ripper had to have been somebody who was a doctor, who had anatomical knowledge, and Holmes did have that. He did go to medical school. He was a doctor. He was a skilled doctor, I believe. So he does have that in common with Jack the Ripper too. Right here in my notes it says H.H. Holmes was a qualified doctor. However, I think that's probably just a coincidence. Because, like I said, first of all, the theory that he was killing prostitutes to distract from the rich women, that just doesn't make sense to me. But I don't know. Maybe there's more to this theory that has more credit. I think their ways of killing were very different. I think they just... I don't think they're the same person. I think a lot of people want killers to be connected that just aren't. A lot of people want it to be like some sort of Marvel universe. But it's not. Spoiler alert. No. Freaking man was across the ocean. Granted, I haven't seen anything predominantly saying H.H. Holmes went to London at this time. So, I don't know. Holmes never left America though. I never found anything saying he left, I never found anything saying he went to Britain. He went to Toronto, which is in Canada, but I think that's probably as far as he went. The only other country he ever been to, as far as I can tell, was Canada. So I haven't found anything saying definitively he was in London. That doesn't mean he wasn't, but I think there probably would have been record of that. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I haven't personally found anything. Alright, next we'll go into Jack the Ripper's non-canonical victims. Yesterday we went to the 5 canonical victims. Those are the people we believe and are certain were killed by Jack the Ripper. These are people we're not sure. Hey, what's up, Mario Taku? Hey, long time no see. How you been? Good, finishing some payments and shit. Oh, that's good. Alright, now Jack's non-canonical victims. These are the people that we are not sure are victims of Jack the Ripper. They could be and they could not be. Alright, we're gonna start with Martha Tabram. It's debated whether or not she's the actual first victim, rather than, what was her name, Mary Nicole? Some people believe Martha Tabram was the very first victim of Jack the Ripper. Like other victims, she had a drinking problem and turned to prostitution as a way to survive. It's not known how Martha spent the last day of her life, but she did, at some point, meet up with a fellow prostitute, Marianne Connolly, and went drinking with her. At around 4:45 a.m., John Saunders Reeve, a waterside laborer, headed out of his apartment and found a woman lying in a pool of blood. I forgot what Jack the Ripper did. I know he was a serial killer, but did he have a killing pattern? He struck on weekends. He killed, his victims were all prostitutes, and they all had drinking problems. I did a stream about it yesterday, but I'll give you the quick rundown. We don't use, also, is that a new model? Yes. Thank you for noticing. Jack the Ripper, he's like the most famous serial killer ever. Excuse me for not knowing history. Everybody knows who Jack the Ripper is. Like, even people who aren't into true crime know who he is. Silly goose otaku. Where was I? Yeah, he found a woman lying in a pool of blood. He hurried to find a policeman and returned with Constable Barrett, whom he had encountered patrolling the vicinity of George Yard. Barrett sent Reeves to fetch a local medic, and Dr. Timothy Killing, who had carried out the examination of the woman, pronounced her dead and gave it his opinion that she had been brutally murdered. I guess we needed an expert for that. The attack on Martha Tabram had been a frenzied one. 39 stab wounds from her throat to her lower abdomen. Dr. Killing later told the inquest that the killer had used 2 different blades. The majority of the wounds had been inflicted with an ordinary pocket knife. A deep wound to her breast that significantly was also... Wait, what? Oh, wait, yeah. He was also of the belief that sexual intercourse had not occurred recently, ruling out assault as the motive for murder. On the 9th of August 1888, Mary Ann Connolly turned up at the Commercial Street Police Station. Couldn't tell with 39 stab wounds in the chest, you know? Yeah, maybe she was brutally murdered. Maybe. We don't know. We're not quite sure. But probably, maybe. Anyway, August 9th, 1888, and Mary Ann Connolly turned up at Commercial Street at the police station. She informed the police the victim, who she had known as Emma, went on a drinking spree in the company of 2 soldiers. So when they went out drinking, they were joined by 2 soldiers. Oh, by the way, I should mention, Mary Ann Connolly also has a nickname called Pearly Paul. So if I say Pearly Paul, I'm referring to Mary Ann Connolly. I'm referring to this girl that's friends with the victim. Police had lost faith in Connolly's veracity as a witness. Their first station was captured in an article in the South Wales Echo, Monday 20th, 1888. It says, Pearly Paul is a dangerous person to trust too. She bamboozled the police into an idea that she could give them a clue about the Whitechapel murder. She bamboozled them. I like them using that word. That's a word I like to use a lot. It was done by a corporal and a private in the Grenadier Guards at the Tower on Bank Holiday. While the soldiers were paraded, Polly picked out the men, but her corporal was a private with good conduct stripes on his arm and a spotless character with an irreproachable alibi. The other man was shown to be equally innocent, so that the police had been fooled all this time, following up a false clue. It is always dangerous to trust the identification to the evidence of an ignorant, excitable woman of Pearly Paul's class. In fact, her testimony at best is never a pearl of a great price. Okay, so it's to my understanding, judging by this article, Polly pointed out who she thought was a corporal, but was a private with good conduct, a man of exemplary character. It's entirely possible that she met up with a soldier who was a private, but, he accompanied her at the bar, and, to impress her, he may have lied, said, oh, I'm big there, I'm up there in the ranks, I'm a corporal. I don't know what that is. I'm sure she didn't either. So she's probably just saying what she was told, She might not know. I don't think the fact that this man was not a corporal is anything that discredits her, honestly. Let's see. Going on in the article, Polly pointed out that she thought what she thought was a corporal, but a private with a good conduct, man of exemplary character who was in the barracks by 10 o'clock on bank holiday night. Other evidence as to his innocence is also respecting the private's movements on the night of the crime. He was also very forthcoming. He was exonerated, while the second man, also of exemplary good character. You really do like murder mysteries, huh? Oh yes, I love them. I'm very fascinated by true crime, especially vintage true crime like this. Falling in love with the devil is contagious with his tricks. Indubitably quite. While the second, also a man of exceptionally good character, it is asserted that Pearly Powell has identified 2 innocent men who could not have been in Whitechapel at the time. The police will not further seek her aid in this mystery. Neither of the men wore sidearms and left the barracks on bank holiday and could not possibly have been within each other's company. The authorities say they must look elsewhere for a clue. This clue, they assert, will be given by one whom they trust as a reliable witness. Now, my opinion, could she have misidentified these people? Sure. If they were able to prove that they were not there, then I'll give these soldiers the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they weren't there. However, that does not mean, people are misidentified in lineups all the time. So I don't think that makes Polly a liar. I don't see why she would make this up. I'm kind of confused what she would gain from this. So it's still entirely possible. Like I said, a private could have came up to her and was like, "Hey, I'm big there. I'm up there in the ranks. I'm a tough dude." But just to impress her or something. I still think they should have looked into this a little more. Not just been like, "Oh, this guy you said you saw was incorrect, so you're just a liar." I think that's very odd. Anyway, today there is considerable debate as to whether Martha Tabram was the victim of Jack the Ripper. Her injuries were not consistent with the mutilations sustained by the other victims, who are now seen as the 5 canonical victims of Jack the Ripper. Her killer had targeted her throat and lower abdomen, as the Ripper did with his victims. Therefore, it's possible that Martha was the first victim. Well, yeah, because, he might have just been testing the waters. Killers usually escalate, and with every murder, Jack was getting more and more bold. So I'm not too surprised if this is his first victim, that he probably didn't do all the organ stealing and all that stuff. That would be very normal, I would say, for him to just slit her throat and play in her abdomen a little. I think it's possible. At least that's my thoughts. Next victim, Alice McKenzie was murdered early hours of July 17th, not 19, that would be a whole century later, 1889. It was immediately speculated that her death was the return of Jack the Ripper, as a prolonged absence this was 9 months after the last kill, 9 months after the Mary Kelly kill, I believe. At 12:50 on July 17th, 1889, Police Constable Walter Andrews found the body of local prostitute Alice McKenzie lying close to a lamppost on the pavement of Castle Alley, just off Whitechapel High Street. Her skirt had been pulled up. There was blood all over her thigh and abdomen, which it transpired was coming from a zigzag, albeit fairly superficial, a wound that ran from just beneath her breast to her navel. Divisional Police Surgeon George Baxter. Wait, Divisional Police Surgeon? What the heck's a police surgeon? This man's doing it all. Damn. Alright, let's see what this professional has to say. Oh my gosh, he's a police surgeon. Dr. George Baxter Phillips. You go, man. Was summoned. They summoned him, and he examined the body and pronounced her dead. Got all these credentials. He's a police surgeon. And they call him to ask if this corpse is alive. What, this ain't The Walking Dead. Now, this, I would say, must be somebody else acting as Jack the Ripper due to the timeline. I actually believe so too, actually. Like a police supervisor, I guess. Maybe. I like the idea that this man is a police officer and a surgeon, honestly. I don't know what a police surgeon is, but I'm just going with the theory that this man does it all. I think it's hilarious. Ooh, I know I'm just being stupid here. I know I'm just being stupid, but they did say that the Jack the Ripper probably had some sort of medical knowledge. This guy got surgeon in his name. He's a police surgeon, so he probably knows the police routes. That could be. I'm not accusing Dr. George Baxter Phillips of being Jack the Ripper. I'm just saying, if he was Jack the Ripper, he could have gotten away with it. Now, I'm not saying this police surgeon is just in fact Jack the Ripper. Just a little theory, a dumb one that I wanted to throw out there. Anyway, description circulated newspapers, including the Western Times, which published a description on Thursday, 18th July, 1889. And this article says, or this newspaper, the victim of the murder was about 45 years of age, was 5 foot 4 inches in height, had brown hair and eyes, and a fair complexion. She is believed to have been of the unfortunate class, but has not yet been identified. She wore a red staff and bodice patch under her arm and brown staff skirt. She also had on a linsey petticoat, black stockings, buttoned boots, paisley shawl, no hat or bonnet. One peculiarity in the description may serve for purpose of identification. Part of the nail on the thumb on the left hand is deficient.
That you could.
Oh, deficient, like defective. Something was wrong in their hand. Okay. The article also mentioned that a clay pipe had been found near the woman's body. Western Times. Oh, okay. Western Times reported that the woman had been identified later the day of the murder. Several hours elapsed before the woman was identified, but a man named John McCormick came forward during the day and recognized her as Alice McKenzie, with whom he had lived with for 6 or 7 years, and has lodged with him and his wife in common lodging in Gun Street, kept by a man named Tenpenny. McCormick stated that he did not know whether the deceased had been married, and the reason of her going out last night was that they had a slight quarrel, and that she had never, to his knowledge, been out late at night previously. Okay, so I think he's implying here, like, he didn't think she was a prostitute, she was just an ordinary woman. McCormick speaks of her as a hardworking woman and seems very upset at this occurrence. Okay, and that's the last bit of the article. McCormick also explained that the pipe belonged to Alice and testified that she smoked a great deal and used a clay pipe. This led to her being known as Clay Pipe Alice in the district. Wait, quick question. Were all these kills on girls who were poor, minus being prostitutes? Yes. Most often. Actually, yes. I didn't even connect this yesterday when we were talking about it, but a repetitive part of the story was like each girl needed to get money for a place to stay. Like they were getting kicked out of like these lodging places, so they were like, you know what, I'm gonna get a few quick bucks so that I can pay for my bed for tonight. So yes, these girls were all like poor. Yes, they were all in poverty. Yes. Dr. Phillips, remember him, probably not Jack the Ripper, but it could be. Dr. Phillips later reported that the woman's injuries did not suggest that this was the work of Jack the Ripper. There was, however, disagreement on whether Mackenzie's murder marked Jack the Ripper's return. Later that day, James Monroe, police commissioner, reported to the Home Office that every effort will be made to discover the murderer, who I am inclined to believe is identical with the notorious Jack the Ripper of last year. Dr. Thomas Bond, who examined the body of Alice Mackenzie at the mortuary, was also of the opinion that the injuries suggested this was another Ripper killing. Dr. Phillips, on the other hand, believed that the wounds were not severe enough to suggest Jack the Ripper style killing. So there's disagreements here. Drama! So prostitution besides lifting jobs would be easier to catch for easy cash for girls. Yeah. I also could be wrong. I could be totally wrong, but I'm pretty sure prostitution wasn't illegal back then. I could be totally wrong. I could have swore I read that somewhere. But I'm not sure if prostitution was illegal back then. Especially with how open a lot of these girls were about like, you're gonna kick me out of here? Then I'm gonna go do some prostitute stuff and I'll be right back with my rip money. You know? A lot of these girls are pretty open about it. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't illegal back then. Again, could be wrong. I also believe this is a time where like brothels and stuff were a thing, so I am pretty sure this wasn't illegal yet. Final victim, that we're not sure is Jack the Ripper's, is Frances Coles. The final victim, her body was discovered 2:15 a.m. on a Friday 13th of February, 1891. Oh, dang. That's a few years. Wait, 1891? Like, that's not too far off, but I just realized in my notes. Maybe that was a typo or something. Anyway, she was found by Police Constable Ernest Thompson as he was passing through the archway of the Great Eastern Railway, which led from Swallow Gardens to Ormond Street. Thompson passed the spot 15 minutes before, was adamant that the body hadn't been there then. Returning at 2:15 a.m., he heard a man's footsteps walking away from him. He looked in the arch and noticed a figure lying on the ground. Shining his lamp on it, he found, to his horror, was the body of a woman lying in a pool of blood, which was flowing from the terrible wound on her throat that ran from ear to ear. "Chase that man you saw walking away!" What the hell? Thompson immediately blew his whistle, raised the alarm to the neighboring officers. Hyde and Hinton came running to the scene. They were soon joined by Constable Elliot. None of these officers went looking for that man that was walking away. None of them. They were all just like, hey, let's look at this body. Like, what the heck? What's going on here? Come on. Oh, constables, get your crap together. Go after the guy. Elliot later stated that shortly after 2 o'clock he had heard the whistle blown. He later stated that he would have heard the cry of a woman, but everything was very quiet until the whistle. Jack seemed to be getting a bit sloppy with his victims. Jack was always sloppy, I think. Like, sloppy in this very organized way that I can't explain. But yeah. If this is Jack the Ripper, he's also getting lazier. I'm not seeing anything about, like, organs being missing or nothing like that. He's just kind of cutting them up, which wasn't his style. Checking for signs of life, the officers found the body to be quite warm, and they also felt a faint pulse. Okay. Hyde then fetched a local medic, Dr. Oxley, who arrived at the scene and pronounced her dead. Hinton, meanwhile, headed off to the police station to fetch the senior officer, and nobody went after the man that was walking away. Okay, very... Good job, whatever. He returned with Inspector Flanagan. That name sounds made up. That is not his name. They're lying. Who ordered the police officers who were now arriving at the scene to search the area and to stop and question anybody they found suspicious or who might be able to provide him for any information. You know that man that was walking away from the corpse? In my opinion, he might be a little bit suspicious. Just a little bit. Meanwhile, in accordance to instructions issued at the murders of 1888, Flanagan ordered the body remained in position in which it was discovered. Then he carried out an in-depth search surrounding for clues. Soon after, Dr. George Baxter Phillips, you remember him, the police surgeon? He's back. He arrived at the scene, and upon examining the body, he found 2 cuts to the woman's throat, which he stated were sufficient to account for death. Crucially, Phillips was also of the opinion that the nature of the wound and posture of the body did not connect this murder with the series of previous murders which were accompanied with mutilation. On the night of Saturday, 14th, 1891, officers managed to locate Frances Cole's father, James William Cole, and Mary Ann Cole's, her sister, who lived in Kingsland, to identify the body, as well as her landlady, Mrs. Haig. I'm going to call her Mrs. Haig, because otherwise it'd be Mrs. Hag, and I feel like that'd be kind of rude. According to Mrs. Haig, Frances asked her to let her come back and promised to pay the rent she owed, then went away. Mrs. Haig saw her in a public house at the corner of Montague Street. She was with a man who was treating her to a drink. He had fair complexion and a light mustache. Oh wait, let me take this H.H. Holmes off. I don't know why. I was like, oh, this isn't really about him anymore. I just realized it was still up there. Now that Frances Cole had been identified, the police turned their attention to who might have been responsible for the murder and began looking for the man who was treating her to a drink. It soon transpired that James Thomas Sadler, a 53-year-old merchant, seaman, and fireman, Sadler, his name is Sadler. Sadler was a former client of hers. After a few drinks, they decided to spend the night together. They spent most of February 12th, 1891, on a pub crawl around the area. By the evening, both of them were extremely intoxicated. Around 7:30 p.m. that evening, Frances turned up to a shop on 25 Nottingham Street where she bought a black crepe hat. According to Peter Hawkes, the man who served her, he said Frances was 3 sheets in the wind. Leaving the shop, according to Hawkes, she had gone off with a man who was looking in the window while Coles was in the shop. Hawkes would later pick Sadler out of the lineup of the police station as the man she had gone off with. Later that night, as they were making their way along Thrall Street, Sadler was attacked by a woman in a red shawl who came up on him from behind. 2 men were with the woman, and robbed him of his watch and money. Apparently, Frances watched the attack and did not intervene, and that disgusted Sadler. He told the police that he was very angry at Frances for not helping him. An argument ensued in the 2 of them, and they went their separate ways. At 11:30, a very drunk Frances Coles turned up at the lodging house where they had been the previous night, sitting on a bench in the kitchen, and rested her head on her arms and fell asleep. A very belligerent Sadler turned up soon after, his face bloody and bruised. He told the night watchman, "I have been robbed, and if I knew who done it, I would go for them." But since Sadler didn't have any money to pay for bed, he had no choice but to ask him to leave. At 12:30, 13th February, Frances woke up. She also lacked money for a bed and was forced to leave the lodging house. At 1:45 a.m., Frances met a fellow prostitute, Ellen Kalana, on Commercial Street. Shortly after this meeting, according to Kalana's later testimony, she was solicited by a violent man in a cheese cutter hat. Kalana refused him, whereupon he punched her in the face and blacked her eye. What the heck? He then approached Frances, who ignored Kalana's advice to leave the man alone, and headed off towards Minories with the man. Meanwhile, Thomas Sadler tried to force his way back on board to a ship called SS Fez, and had become involved in a violent altercation with a group of dock workers. In the course, he sustained a nasty scalp wound. Having made 2 attempts to get into a lodging house in East Smithfield, Sadler was spotted next on the pavement outside the Royal Mint. Sergeant Edwards, who later recalled he had appeared drunken and bloodied. Ostrich could plainly see that Sadler had been assaulted and questioned him. Sadler stated he'd been attacked by some men against the dock's gate who had brutally ill-used him. On a Saturday morning, acting on descriptions and information from various witnesses, including Sergeant Edwards, Detective Sergeant Don, and Detective Gill tracked Sadler down at the Phoenix Beer House and arrested him. Sadler offered no resistance and was arrested and taken before the police inspector Donald Sutherland Swanson, who subjected him to a searching examination. Sadler admitted to having known Frances Coles and to have been in her company. However, he was adamant he had nothing to do with her murder. There were reports in the press that the cut on Frances Cole's throat was very likely Reports pressed that the cut on Frances' throat was very much alike. Okay, now I know what this sentence is saying. It was similar to Mackenzie's throat. There was evidently some suspicion that he may have also been responsible for that crime, if not all the other Whitechapel murders. On 24th of 1891, Sadler appeared at the Thomas Police Court charged with, quote, willfully causing the death of Frances Coles by cutting her throat with a knife on the 13th. But the case soon fell apart. Sadler was able to prove that he had indeed been mugged. He had not been with Frances Coles in the hours before she was murdered, and when it was also revealed that his knife was probably too blunt to have inflicted the wound on Coles' throat. The case against him collapsed, and he was able to prove he had been at the sea with some of the other men when the murder occurred. And that's all the non-canonical victims that we're not sure is are killed by Jack the Ripper. I'm personally of the belief Martha Tabram very well could have been the very first killer. The very first victim. She didn't kill nobody, I don't think. It's entirely possible. Yes, it's not as organ-stilly as the other murders, but he was progressing with each murder, so this doesn't seem that weird to me. I'm finding it hard to believe that two people with this similar emo would be doing the same thing. However, the other two, instead of progressing, they regressed, which makes me think they're copycats, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, that's all I have to show you guys. Thank you for learning with me today.